Last night, the Phoenix Suns lost to the Oklahoma City Thunder 120 to 107. I would say really the biggest story of this game is not really the game itself, but the post game when it comes to what Dylan Brooks and Devin Booker said about the refs during the game, how they were not happy the way they were reffing and how they were biased. So what I would say at first is that these refs were bad. They're absolutely right. There were some bullshit calls that OKC got in their favor, but I believe ultimately what did them in this game was their lack of ability to get defensive stops when they need to get them. That once OKC got their offense clicking, they couldn't get any stops against them. OKC got whatever they wanted. They could run whatever play, whether it was ISO with SGA, Chet, or Jalen Williams, and they would just easily score. And there wasn't really much defensive resistance against OKC. I think that's really what harmed them in this game. And when I look at the big picture, I would say. And plus, they just had so many more turnovers. They had 21 turnovers compared to OKC's 10. So that is really what ultimately took them out. But I will say they have legit reasons to be angry at the refs. They called a bunch of stupid calls against them that didn't make any sense. I'm just gonna read some of the stuff that Dillon Brooks has said. Here goes. This is what he said about SGA. He's a little frail. That's what the refs are going to call. I got to be smart about it. This is the playoffs, a man's game. I used to watch this back when Michael Jordan was playing, when LeBron was younger. This is just physical basketball. I don't get why all the dropping, the falling, and the flopping, and the flailing, and all this stuff is allowed when we get to the playoffs. This is about who's the better team and who's the more winning team. We don't want to decide the games on free throws. I got to look back at it and see if they are really fouls. All I know is when I be watching and was out for the playoffs, I've been in the playoffs, or I be watching for, I was in the NBA, it's straight physical. It's straight low-scoring physical basketball. You got to score the basketball to win or get stops to win, not this flailing or get to a line. We got to stop that. So I actually agree with Dillon Brooks on this regard. He's absolutely right. I hate watching these games where they call touch fouls and they don't let you play. To me, it always gives the offensive player the biggest advantage, and it makes it not fun when it's a free throw shooting contest. He's absolutely right about it. It used to be very physical during the playoffs where you could play defense and you didn't have to really worry about these touch calls. But in one regard, I would say that he's wrong, because even back in the day, I would say the superstars still got bullshit calls in their favor. Like I remember Kobe Bryant getting bullshit calls in his favor whenever he played the Spurs, that at times it was difficult to guard him because the refs would sometimes call touch fouls and sometimes they wouldn't. So you just never knew how to adjust properly. Not to say that Kobe's an easy player to shut down, because he's not, but that to me is an example of just the frustration of that. But yeah, I definitely get where he's coming from. I also liked when he said this quote right here about refs needing to face accountability. Let's get some interviews with the chief that's out there. Accountability needs to be shown out there, to be honest, so we can actually see or hear what they have to say about the game. He's right. The refs should have to do post-game interviews. They should have to do press conferences, because I think that would put more heat on them and it would force them to call the games more fairly and not to give phantom calls to superstar players or certain glamour teams that the league and the media favors. I think they definitely should do that. Absolutely. Just going back to this game, there were some insane calls that didn't make any sense, like Devin Booker falling out of bounds, trying to save the ball, and he gets a technical simply because Caruso yells that he deserves a technical and they give it to him. That to me did not make any sense at all. It was pretty stupid. But not to say that bullshit technical determined the game. They were already down 94 to 75, but still, it's just dumb. It doesn't make any sense. Then you had a few plays with Chet that didn't make any sense at all, where one play he got behind Phoenix Suns center Aso Iguodala, I think that's how you say his name, and he was trying to get a rebound and he just flopped while Aso was boxing him out for the rebound. That to me was a stupid call. That didn't make any sense. And then there was another call where I think Grayson Allen was guarding Chet, where Chet tried to do the flail rip through move to get contact, but Grayson didn't even touch him, and they still called the foul. So there's a lot of bad officiating when it comes to OKC. They get a lot of stupid calls, a lot of phantom calls, and they should be held accountable for that. I definitely agree with calling out these refs, and I'm just gonna read out what Devin Booker said. It's definitely something that has to be looking at. I'm going to read it again. It's definitely something that has to be looking at. I heard Caruso tell them to call the tech, and he ended up doing it. In my 11 years, I haven't called a ref out by name, but James Williams was terrible tonight through and through. It's bad for the sport, bad for the integrity of the sport. People are going to start viewing this as the WWE if they're not held responsible. Now, I definitely agree with Book on this one, that when these refs are not held accountable, it hurts the sport. People don't take it seriously. They look at it the same way that people look at WWE wrestling. He's absolutely right about it. And I just want to add to it in the sense that I just really just shake my head with the NBA when it comes to these bad referees today, because back when I was growing up during the 90s and the early 2000s, they could get away with corrupt reffing because you didn't have social media back then. You didn't have YouTube, IG, or Facebook, or TikTok, where people could show clips of how corrupt these refs were. They could just sweep it under the rug. The media usually wouldn't call it out because their preferred teams were winning most of the time, so they didn't care. Like, I look at, for example, back in 2002 when the Lakers had that infamous Game 6 against the Sacramento Kings. That game is so corrupt that even today on YouTube, the league will still try to take down that game because they don't want people to see how bad the refs were and how blatantly obvious it was that they were favoring the Lakers. That it's just such a bad look, that game. And I think even Shaq knew that they won that series on highway robbery. So, but that shows you that how bad the refs were back then, that they could call games that blatantly favored certain teams, certain players, and not had to worry about it. The 2002 Game 6 game against the Kings is the best example of that. And the league got away with it because, again, you just didn't have social media back then to highlight all these bad calls, to show just how unfair it was. Granted, there was a media backlash nationwide to that game. A lot of people complained about it. Even Ralph Nader complained about it, so it got some attention. But I think a badly reffed game like that today would get even more attention and would even blow up even more due to social media. And just when it comes to gambling, there'll be a lot of people who are outraged. So I think the league has to be careful, and they can't be stupid to deny like these bad calls, because we have so many social media avenues to see how bad this stuff is that you can't hide it anymore. You can't sweep it underneath the rug. To play dumb and pretend that it doesn't exist, it's just insulting for the fans, and it will turn off people. I think the league has to address these refs when they call phantom calls, that it has to be addressed. Otherwise, you could lose your fan base now in the social media era. You can't sweep it underneath the rug and hide it and pretend it doesn't exist. It's just not going to work. And I think last night's game really illustrates it, because there's so many clips posting all these dumb calls that didn't make any sense. So the league needs to clean this up. But like I said before, I think OKC was ultimately the better team in this game. There were some bad calls, but that wasn't really the real reason why the Suns lost. They turned the ball over too many times. But I don't have anything else to say about this.